Thank you. The theme for today is helping our young people thrive when they return into school. And I know some of you may already have your students returning as we're talking today. And if you missed out, I want to say thank you for joining us. Stu Semigran here with Educare Foundation. And our session today is with hosting by How Kids Learn Foundation, Temescal Associates. And a very special thanks to Sam Pia, the founder of Temescal Associates, and Stacy Dario. And as we know, this has been a tremendous year of challenge, year of learning. And as we're starting to prepare ourselves across the country, as students are coming back in, I'm going to invite everybody in this opportunity of all of us together to look back into what learning has been as we're starting to now really look forward with new eyes. And we know our kids, our families, lots of challenges, lots of hardships. And a lot of it's been dependent upon their circumstances, their income, their family income, the racial backgrounds and ethnicity of our students and their communities. So as we're starting, I'd just like you to consider to think with us today, and we can learn together on what do our kids most need? How do we be honest to address the impact of this last year and really prepare for their well-being? And also we're going to look at what the family's needs are and our staff and our colleagues. And what can we do, whatever positions each of us are in, after school staff, educators, parents, interested others, to really help our kids thrive, not just survive, but thrive as they come back in. And maybe a key part of that, which we'll explore today, is how do we build back community? How do we build back a sense of family, a sense of connection, as things are just starting to find their way back in together? So we're in for a treat today. We have an amazing group of panelists. And as we get started, if you're not muted, please just take care of muting yourself. And soon enough, you'll have a chance to listen in on the panelists. Our four panelists from across the country, many levels of work with youth development, after school programming, diverse populations of students in rural, urban communities. And let me just share a little bit about each, and then you'll get to learn and meet them. Today with us, we have Atrilla Sheba Gillis, who's the Director of Expanded Learning at Asana Academies in Los Angeles. On the state level, she served on many state committees in after school. She's featured in training videos and was recently appointed to the California Department of Education Expanded Learning Policy Committee. With Atrilla is Dr. Gil Noam, the founder and the director of the Pear Institute, Partners in Education and Resilience, associate professor at Harvard Medical School and McLean Hospital. Gil has published over 200 papers, articles, and books in the areas of child and adolescent development, as well as risk and resiliency in clinical, school, after-school settings. And we're glad that Dr. Noam is with us. You're also going to be able to meet Gloria Haley is the regional lead at Butte County Office of Education in Northern California. Gloria is a leader in the after-school world in California, expertise particularly in the needs of students living in rural communities. For several years, she's hosted empowering after-school program conferences in Northern California. And last is Jose Navarro, former California Teacher of the Year, currently the lead administrative director at Birmingham Community Charter High School in Los Angeles. Jose is an inspirational speaker, school leader, deeply committed to social justice and addressing the social, emotional needs of our young people. You're in for a treat. They're wonderful folks. And what I'd like them to do, and we'll start with Atrilla, is just in a couple minutes to introduce themselves to you and maybe their overarching thoughts of the day. So Atrilla, let me turn it over to you, and thanks for being with us.
No worries. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to participate today. Stu mentioned that I am from Asana Academies, which is a network of charter schools located in the Los Angeles area. All of our schools are K-8. I feel like our programs really thrived during COVID more than we ever have before. I feel like it was an excellent opportunity for our staff to prove that they are quality educators and not just after school staff. We really became a key part of the day-to-day operations and taking care to make sure that students, were receiving what they needed academically and socially. And so I'm happy to be here today, happy to share our successes and our ahas with you all so that when we do come back on campus as a unit, as after school, we're stronger and we're better than before.
Thank you, Trilla. And Dr. Noem, if you'd introduce yourself and say a few words. Thank you.
Yes. You can call me Gil, no question. I am really excited to be among California friends here. I'm the only kind of odd man out. I have lived in California. Both of my sons live in LA and San Francisco. So I do a lot of work. Michael Funk is a close friend of mine, good friend of mine. So I feel like I'm kind of where I should be, which is in California. Now, I've already been introduced, and that was a really quite nice introduction. I have been very, very concerned about what's happening, like all of us. And when Memorial Day hit, and it looks like this pandemic is really taking hold, and we're going to be with that for a long time, I decided on Memorial Day to write a book, and I was done Labor Day, and it was about 10 bets. In other words, how to deal with education during the pandemic and beyond. And that was quite a journey. And I'm really happy to describe this because we're doing a lot of work in schools, out of school time, from the perspective of mental health, socio-emotional learning. But I wanted to really figure out like what's going on. And what I really felt was that a lot of things were breaking down because they had already broken down. And I wanted to kind of really not be negative, but want to say, what do we need to do? And so I started the book with the idea of optimism and hope, one chapter around the issues of engaged learning, relationships, structure and norms, all the way to processing and what it takes, what courage it takes to kind of move forward. And I will, in the discussion, kind of go more into details, but I do want to just let you know that I believe that it's really the out of school time that is now in the place where it needs to show the education field in general what it takes, namely a real fundamental radical shift towards relationships between adults and students, towards engaged hands-on learning, really radical shift into that, towards empowerment. I think that we can't just have the kids come back. We need them empowered. We need them to really set norms with us, a focus on adults. And lastly, a real focus on mental health. The issues of mental health were there before, they're now much greater, and we need to figure out positive mental health rather than diagnosing. Okay, I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Gil. And I think you lay the foundation for the return. Has to be something very powerful and very welcoming, that this is not just walking back into school. So thanks for setting the stage for that. And let me turn it over to you, Gloria, for a few words.
Thanks, Stu. So as Stu mentioned, I'm in Northern California and I support 9 counties. And so it's a large geographical area, and it's what I call God's country because it's so beautiful. But I'm certainly here to represent the rural voice of our students. What I have seen during this pandemic COVID time period is some of our schools were able to open up. But I also saw a lot of innovation, a lot of our staff taking things into their own hands and saying, well, if we can't meet in a classroom, maybe we'll buy tents like used for weddings or receptions, and that they would set these tents up so the students could be separated with the proper social distancing and wearing the masks and being outdoors instead of inside. So they are using make and take kits. So students who didn't have the internet connectivity in our region were still able to do make and take learning kits. So what I have seen is, again, this is an opportunity for expanded learning after school programs. They need to be seen as an essential partner in helping our students thrive as they come back into the schools for the remainder of the school year, but for summer and for ongoing purposes during the rest of the following year. What I am surprised at is there are still school districts who can't believe how much work we have done in social emotional learning. They're like, oh, you've been doing this for that long? And they just have never known that in many cases. So I think we need to continue to tell our story that the expanded learning after school programs do address the academic, social, emotional, and physical needs and the interests of our students that we serve with a very, like Gil said, hands-on experiential learning. And in California, we absolutely serve the highest need students. We give priority to the homeless and foster youth, and we give a priority to our low-income students. And I, having come from poverty and being where I am today, is a testament to education, because my dad always said, mija, get a good educación. And he was right. It opened the trajectory for my life. Would have never been the case had my dad not put that in my head. And he came over with the Bracero program, and he only had 3 months of schooling in Mexico. But that's why he came, because he kept saying, this is the land of opportunities. And I have that in my head. And that's why I became a founding member of the Boys and Girls Club here in the Chico area, is because I kept saying, Gloria, you got to do more for the children who are in poverty. Help them, because someone believed in you, you believe in them. So that's why I'm here, and I'm just so proud to be part of this panel. It's an amazing panel, and I'm going to enjoy today, and I hope you do too. So thank you again. Thanks, Stu.
Great. Thank you, Gloria. And when you said you have it in your head, I also know you have it in your heart.
I do.
And it comes through. And that's what the kids resonate with. So thanks, Gloria, for being with us today. And want to turn it over to you, Jose.
Good morning, everyone. I was so scared I was going to be muted. That's the quote of 2020, 2021 is, you're muted, you're muted. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says you're muted. Just a few things going through my mind right now. I was in Los Angeles Unified for 21 years. Now I'm a lead administrative director at Birmingham Community Charter. We got about 3,200 kids. And it's the largest independent charter in California, Title I charter. And so the things that are rolling around in my head, I think when this happened, I felt very vulnerable. Because like Stu said, I have a lot of cool things on my resume, but none of them had ever been tried during a pandemic, during distance learning. And so all the skills I had in my toolbox didn't work. And so I had to take a step back and to see what did work. And one thing I fell back on was it's sort of like a Wizard of Oz moment. You always had what you needed, is falling back to our values, integrity, love, care. And everybody always says they love their students. Well, what does love look like? And what does love look like in a distance learning setting? And so that's really what I've been pushing myself. There's a few things that have been going around in my head that really were really confirmed, is that you have to know why you're doing what you're doing. Whether it's you're a school leader, you're after school, or you're a teacher. Because telling an 11th grader that just lost 6 members of their family to COVID that they need to know this just in case, it's just bullshit. Nobody cares. Why do I need to know this? I have a phone. I don't need just in case. I have just in time. I don't need to know that. I don't need to store this memory. So you better know why you're doing what you're doing. And the mental health issues, I totally agree with you, Gil. The mental health issues were everything. You have to take care of Maslow before you take care of Bloom's. You got to take care of Maslow, take care of their needs before you try to get them a Bloom's. The idea that, oh, my kids, this, but I have to have high expectations. This is AP or this is honors. This kid is in an honors English class. No, this kid is in a pandemic. This isn't distance learning. This is crisis learning. Don't worry about learning loss. Take care of the kid. So really trying to get my staff to shift their mindset around this and really develop some empathy. And when I was at a meeting and somebody mentioned, well, I got through, I'm gonna have a tough life too. If I got through it, so can they. The lack of empathy on the adults, from the adults, is really troubling. So I'm trying to figure out how to address that. We have to talk about privilege because this pandemic did not look the same for everybody. If you are a single mother with 5 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment and you're using just a hotspot the school gave to you, that looks very different than what my daughter looks like in her own room with a beautiful mesh system Wi-Fi. Looks very different. We got to talk about privilege. We got to talk about poverty. We got to talk about every time, again, well, I got through it. Why can't you? Yeah, well, you're also a white educated male. Do you think maybe you had a head start on some of this stuff? Again, the relevance. Don't just cover stuff. What's at the heart of what you want to teach, not just what's easy to grade. There's so many different issues I'm struggling with right now, but one of them is simply just trying to meet a kid and see them. I've been doing home visits since September, social distancing going up. When I come up, they're like, oh my God, this is so awkward, mister. What are you doing at my house? This is so stupid. What are you doing here? I'm here because you matter. And it completely shifts the conversation. I'm here to let you know I see you. Now, what can I do for you? It's a pleasure to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jose. And I think the power in your words and the relevance that we have to see one another. And even today, my invitation is if you're off screen and you can't, come on screen, take a look, see who you're with, take each other in. And that need for our kids and our colleagues to be seen and heard and taken in, that's part of building back in. We're building back in as a group, as a family. So thank you. The way it's going to kind of move on throughout the session today is I'm going to start with a few questions to our panelists. While I'm doing that, feel free to start thinking of questions you have. Put them in our chat. At some point in a little while, we'll open it up for your questions as well. I want this to be an opportunity where we're learning and engaging from each other, because I think the power of these type of internet sessions is more than just listening to a few people. It's about how do we learn from the growth of all of us over this year. And it's been a powerful year to learn. So let me start open with a question to the panelists, which is looking back over this year as we're kind of moving forward, what have been what you see has been the most relevant experiences of our kids? What have been the needs of our kids? What do you think we can learn most as we look back into this past year? And perhaps Gil, Atrilla, if one of you would like to start, Gloria, what do you gain from what we've been through this last year?
I can start. I think that in formulating our programs, we shifted to something called EXL Live, and we really just sat and thought, like, what are the needs of our students? And we realized that the needs that they had were the same needs that we had. They were in isolation. They needed a break. The walls were closing in around them, and they just needed a sense of normalcy. And so I think for us, that's been the biggest thing. So yes, we have our structured sessions, but we also have a session where we're gaming together. Students can log in and they can play with students from across the district. Students can log in and they can cook together, or they can just talk. And so I think that the biggest thing that we saw was just a sense of normalcy. They missed being with their peers. They missed having someone outside of their home to talk to, and they missed just being carefree and being able to have fun and to have that open dialogue. So I think that that was our biggest aha as we started to frame our programming.
Yeah, thank you, Atrilla. I just want to add to that, since you asked me, Stu. We kind of flipped around, and we means Pear and my team in Boston, but we work nationally. We actually decided at a certain point, maybe 5 or 8 years ago, that we needed a North Star of thriving and wellness and learning. And we came up with, someone mentioned Maslow. I mean, we came up with something that has 4 elements, which is the body, self, physical, active engagement, hands-on, assertiveness and voice, belonging and relationships, and reflection and meaning. Those 4 elements make up a young person who's doing well and is open to learning. And so when you apply those 4 elements, and there's a lot of research that we've done and other people, lots of frameworks around, but this is the one that helps us really be simple about where we're going. And when you actually apply this to the pandemic, you look at physical activity, action, engagement, really in the basement, very little. When you go to voice, young people lost their voice during this time. It was really hard to kind of keep that going. Relationships, really hard. Many teachers were able to do this, many after-school providers, but it's really much, much harder. And meaning, purpose, optimism, future, I mean, it's really hard to keep that. So when you actually have a positive view of where things are going, and then you apply where are we right now, we are in a very bad place. However, and this is the last point I want to make, however, if we now really see those are the elements we have to introduce to young people again when they are in school or after school programs, more physical orientation, really team sports, more voice as much as possible, lots of relationships with adults and between adults, and a lot of sense of future and why we're doing this and relevance, we're going to be successful.
Great. Thank you, Gil. Gloria, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add, because I don't look at it as just the COVID time period. I look at it in our region. If many of you remember, in 2017, we had to evacuate about 180,000 people because they thought the Oroville Dam spillway was going to break. And so what ordinarily would take 90 minutes took 10 hours to get from one place to another to get to a place of safety. In 2018, we had the car fire that really moved quickly in the Shasta County and Trinity County, destroying lots of homes. Shortly after that, that was in August, and then in November, we had the tragic, most costly and deadly fire ever in California, was the Camp Fire that destroyed about 95% of Paradise. And many people lost their homes, many people died. I myself, living in Chico, was evacuated because they weren't sure that the winds wouldn't bring it down into the Chico area. And then we just had recently the North Complex fire that took out 2 schools in Berry Creek. And again, consumed a lot of territory in Siskiyou County, Plumas County, and Butte County. So there's a lot of compound trauma that our staff, as well as our children, our students, are dealing with. So when we talk about COVID on top of that, people are starting to use language like PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome disorder. So what I'm looking at is, again, like Jose brought up, this is a mental health issue as well. And so we're thinking outside the box. We're hiring social workers. We're having all kinds of trauma-informed practices and trainings. So it's more than just COVID, but it certainly has escalated in our part of the state. So I just wanted to bring that as part of the bigger picture, because then we'll look at some of the things that we're doing to address that as well. Thanks, Stu.
Excellent. You know, that whole bigger picture, we're going to kind of explore that. And I see in the chat, Raul, thanks for your comment. And others, please join in the chat as well, that some of our kids, just because of their experience with gaming, had an advantage. So some of our kids moved into this virtual world and others didn't, for a variety of reasons. So I would like to kind of get your thoughts on the panel here. What worked best in kind of moving into that virtual world? What can we take? Because we're going to be in a hybrid world of teaching and learning for a while. What can we take of what worked best? What was most challenging to engage kids virtually? So if you kind of speak to the successes and challenges of this virtual teaching mode, and whoever would like to start, perhaps Jose.
You know, what seemed to work best is anytime we can have personal or interpersonal like communication, not just keeping that arm's distance. So starting every class with a check-in, you know, just using restorative practices, circles, sticking to keeping it simple, you know, thinking about the 4 claims of the Common Core, you know, just have kids read something, have them write something, research something, listen and speak. I think people are trying to do what they did in a regular setting, and it's just falling on its face. I think we need to keep it simple and really focus on what do kids actually need. And they really just need connection at this point. And so Dr. Tosbury is a child psychologist. He said that kids really have 3 needs. They want to know the answer to 3 questions. Am I seen? Do I matter? And am I worthy? Am I seen? Do I matter? And am I worthy? And so making sure our kids feel those things and we can answer those things in real time. It's very clear as to which teachers were good at building relationships before. They don't really have much of a problem in a virtual setting. You can make connection in a virtual setting. And those people that had a hard time with it or didn't think it was necessary are really struggling right now. And so a lot of things just been highlighted, but I think what has really worked best, all of us kind of threw our hands up in the air and just, what do we do? What do we do? And I just kept going back. I can't do everything, but I can do something. And so I just started doing the home visits, and that was transformational. And I didn't realize how much my soul needed it. And then just simply holding circles, interviewing kids, having them just tell me what's working, what's not. If you had the power to change something, what would it be? And just asking teachers, hey, do you mind if I step in? And how many teachers were like, yes, please do, take over my class. And they were fine with that. And just having conversations with kids, all their cameras start to turn on. What do you need? And then just when LCFF funds came out about 8 years ago, there was a concept of equal versus equality. And we always want to treat everybody equally, but they don't need that. They need equality. There are some kids that are thriving right now because of bullying, because of the social anxieties. At home, they're thriving. They're absolutely kicking butt. Their grades are through the roof because they don't have to deal with human beings. And there's other kids that are just falling down academically because they need the social interaction. And so giving kids what they need in the virtual setting and when they come back, easing them into it. Again, and I'm going to say it again and again and again, take care of Maslow before you take care of Bloom's. I don't care if my daughter can get an A in your AP class. Is she healthy? Is she cared for? What I mean by equity versus equality is equals you give everybody a glass of water. Equality, I'm not thirsty, I'm hungry. Give me something to eat. Give me what I need versus giving me what you give everyone else.
Great. Thank you so much, Jose. And I see in the chat comment, and I think it really responds to what you're saying, Jose, from Denise. When you're present in a positive way from the heart and let the children know you're there and consistent, they trust and they build that resiliency.
Absolutely. So I think just being a little genuine and being a little vulnerable. I'm listening to some of my daughter's conversations, some of her teachers, and my daughter goes to the school I'm at right now. And there's some people that are just they're going 80-minute periods. They're going from bell to bell, quote unquote. And they don't need to. They don't need to do that. You don't need to pile on all this work. You don't need to do all these things. But the teachers that just say, hey, this is the essence of what I want you to learn. How are you today? What are you going through? What do you need from me? I can't do everything, but what do you need from me, your English teacher? I have a very small piece of this universe, but from my point in this universe, what can I do for you? It really transformed the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Atrilla, anything to add about the skill of virtual learning as an educator? What can we use and bring it into the future with us now?
I think that virtual learning taught me and my district level staff to be more intentional and more deliberate with our training. And so to say to our staff, oh, you have to cultivate relationships and create this safe environment is one thing, but what does that look like for you? And even if I give you an example, because I'll facilitate it and I'll model it for you, how do you adapt it and how do you make it uniquely yours so that it's genuine? Because students have, they'll see right through some BS, right? And if it's not genuine, then they put up a wall and it's over. They don't trust you. They don't want to interact with you. And so we did a lot of very deliberate practicing with them. Literally with, okay, we're going to roll it out to you, and then scheduling them for Zooms where we pretended like we were students and they had to practice making those connections with us. Because I think we hear it a lot. And we say, yeah, that's easy, no problem, I can do it. But like Jose said, these students are going through so much at home, and each of them is uniquely different and they come with different things. And so you have to be deliberate with how you establish those relationships. And so like my thing is walking through a campus, hey, you good? That's natural for me. And kids say yes, or they'll say no, and then I'll stop. For someone else to say, hey, are you good? That's awkward for them. It doesn't feel right. And so finding what feels comfortable and what feels natural for you so that it's genuine. One of the things that we also did is virtual learning allowed us to really, really, really create student-centered learning environments. And so if anyone deals with middle school, you know that middle school literally is like pulling teeth. They won't turn cameras on. They don't want to participate. They don't want to be there. We turned our middle school sessions over to the students. Tell us what you're into. What are you interested in? They literally create our pacing guides for us. So our middle schoolers have given us an entire list of things from LGBTQ topics. They were interested in space. When the space shuttle went up, they literally drive those conversations. And because it's virtual, you have students from all over the district that come together that have established these relationships, and they're a virtual learning community, right? And so one of the things that we said that we'll continue is hosting virtual activities and virtual lessons, even when we're back on campus. We'll set up some projectors, we'll open up Zoom so that across campus, they continue to evolve those relationships that they've made across the district. And then the last thing I want to share is we all know that budgets can be tight, right? And so we're strapped and with what we can bring to students and where we can take them. Virtual learning has given us an excellent opportunity to open access to students. We've done virtual field trips. We've had special guests that our students otherwise would not have had access to. When we come back next week, we're doing a virtual field trip with the Japanese American National Museum. They're going to bring an internment camp survivor in to talk to our students. And so those types of opportunities for us have been amazing because those aren't things that our kids have access to. A lot of them are relegated to South Central or to the Valley or to wherever they live, but we've really been able to like broaden their horizons. We took a virtual field trip to Paris. And so now they know that there's more outside of the scope. There are things that they can ascribe to be like, you know, I need to work hard. I want to get here one day, or I would like to go see that. And so I feel like that literally has been a blessing for us in the curse that is COVID, just providing them access, even though it's virtual.
Wonderful. There's excitement in your voice and your stories because the opportunities we're having now are just amazing. And Gil, I saw your comment. Would you like to speak to what you say about knowing every child?
Yeah, I think, you know, the big dilemma for everyone, for all of us educators, is this idea of personalizing learning. And, you know, many teachers push back and say, it's just too much. I can't, how can I do that with 25 students, 30 students, and then I have 150 if I'm in middle school, at least. How can I do that? Kind of don't put this all on me. And I think that if we think about this, not just that every student needs something different, although that's true, but as a first step, and Jose said that also very, very well, every student needs to feel known. We have to know students. We have to know what their passions are, what they're interested in, their names. That goes a very long way because the rest, through empathy and support, will actually create this extra motivation because the student feels seen and valued. And that we have to do some assessments, actually, self-reports, student voice assessments that are floating around and that we've also created are really a very simple way of getting started with which one can then have discussions with students about.
Wonderful. I mean, this whole conversation about seeing kids and hearing kids, but now engaging them, and really their voice has power and direction for us. And I think it's a way we're moving forward. Along the ways, we got to be mindful of our staff, our colleagues, the parents, the families. So I would love you to address on the panel, how do we best support them? Because they've been also going through their life experiences of challenge. How do we take care of them in the mix of taking care of our kids? Whoever would like to address into that. Gloria, I know you have a strong desire in terms of really supporting your staff and the colleagues that you work with.
Yeah, so Atrilla was talking about the virtual. Again, in some of our frontier and rural sites, we don't have the bandwidth to support distance learning, and so the virtual is not possible. We did experiment a lot this year with having school buses at school sites have hotspots, and so the parents would drive to those specific schools and let the children on those hotspots in the school buses. And so that was one way to deal with it. But then we ran up against parents saying they were running out of gas money before the end of the month. So it's like, okay, now gas cards. We'll start using Frontier Transportation dollars for gas cards for the parents. So but what I do know is that we also experimented with, okay, let's provide meals for the students. And what they did is they would provide also a make and take kit. And the make and take kit would have lesson plans and all of the materials to support that activity, that hands-on experience, right? But we'd also give books and information to parents about what they could do to survive these difficult times and how best to support their children. And I go back to what Jose said. It really is important, if you can, is have your staff do a drive-by and just take some little lesson plans and kits to the parents. You know, I really believe in that face-to-face contact. And when they would set up at the schools and they'd have the meals that they would give out, or the make and take kits for learning, one of the things they did is they made it a festival. So they would have balloons, they'd have banners, they'd have all kinds of placards of good to see you, and they get dressed up, and it was a big festival each time the kids would come and get the make and takes and their meals. So I think it takes that kind of preparation and forethought to be able to be successful in letting them know you care and want that connection with them, and especially for the staff and the parents. One thing that we noticed, there wasn't a lot of things done in the primary languages. So different staff members said, Gloria, you know, I can put this together in Spanish and then we'll distribute it across the entire region. And some did the same things with Hmong. Let's distribute this to our Hmong families. This is how best to support them. So it was that innovation, that coming together and saying, you know, we need to do more for our parents and for our students, and taking the steps necessary to make that happen. And I just applaud what they did on so very little dollars to make things happen. And we even had in one of our programs, the sheriff's department, who said, listen, we have to make these trips anyways, put those make and takes in the back of our car, and we'll just drop them off to the different parents' homes and the children, and that way they'll see us as a viable part of their education as well, so they can build relationships. And I thought that was just very innovative. And I thought, wow, that's community coming together. We had a church who in 90 minutes raised $20,000+ so they could purchase Chromebooks in one community and hotspots for 1 year. And I just thought, that's just amazing. And so there's a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy, a lot of caring, and a desire to make those connections with our children. And I just think these are special times, and it's bringing out some of the best in people. And I'm just motivated by that.
Wonderful. That building community that you speak to, and I see people commenting in the chat, and thank you, and others please do, about communication, about surrounding ourselves with one another. I've been always impressed when I visited Jose over the years at his schools of the active role and the welcome that parents have. Jose, would you speak a little bit about this time coming back in? How do we rebuild with community, with our parents engaged? Any thoughts on that?
You know, I feel like that's actually been a bright spot, has been parent engagement, because many parents have been we've had just amazing turnout. Our Coffee of the Principal, I have a PFET, which is Family Engagement Team. And the response, because they can just jump on a Zoom session instead of coming to the school. So that's been a bright, we're probably going to continue. And I wrote that in the chat. I hope things don't continue the way they were, because it wasn't working for many kids. So what are we going to do different? But like you said, Gloria, innovation, a lot of these sites, platforms really worked well. I used improvement science with my PFET team, my family and parent engagement team. And I gave them the data. Instead of, family engagement needs to look a little differently. Coming to the school and stapling papers in the back of the class, that's not engagement. That's just labor. But how do you engage them? So giving them our data and go, let's ask 5 whys. Let's pick one of these reasons. Let's do a PDSA on it, a Plan, Do, Study, Act. Let's use improvement science. And this is high level, like really cerebral stuff. And our parents are like just digging into it. This past week, we did a scavenger hunt with our website. So I gave all of our parents a list of things I want them to find, like the color of tie of our business. You know, in this faculty picture, what color of the tie was our CBO wearing? Whatever, just 20 things. Is our website useful? Instead of just saying yes or no, I want you to see if you could find these 20 things. We were amazed at how many things our parents can't find. And that in combination, how much that damn website costs us, it's not a good use of money. And so using our parents to really inform our systems and our instruction has been great. I've really been able to engage more parents, but fundamentally, just going back to, and it connects to the parent piece, is we have to have more conversations. And I see Jeff Austin on this. Jeff Austin and I started the school where I was principal at Social Justice Mantos Academy, and now he's the principal there. But we were constantly figuring out what is the evolution of being a teacher, because what worked 30 years ago in teaching doesn't work today. It'd be just like if I went to the doctor and the doctor tried what they did on me 30 years ago, that'd be malpractice. Don't do that. And so what you did in your classroom, so the idea that, well, I teach biology. No, you teach students. We need to fundamentally talk about the evolution of what it means to be a teacher now. And our unions need to get on board with this. Our contracts do not reflect this. But the idea that socio-emotional learning is just tier one, that's just something everybody should be doing. Trauma-informed practices, everyone should be doing that. Engaging our parents, everyone should be doing that. This is not like, okay, now we're gonna have a circle at tier 3. Now that the kid has fallen through all these steps, he's on his way out the door, on his way to we're creating that school to prison pipeline. Let's have a circle. Nah, that should have happened in his English class around grapes of wrath, not around his wrath on the playground. And so the idea is simply discussing the evolution that needs to take place. We have to talk about that. It doesn't, what it meant to be a teacher 20 years ago isn't what it means today. Parent engagement 20 years ago isn't what it means today. Our parents are sophisticated in any language they come to us at, and they want to be involved. They want to be engaged, not simply just a sit and get. So I got to say that's actually been a bright spot for us, is parent engagement during this pandemic. And this evolution of what it looks like, that's where I'm trying to go with this, Gloria, the idea of innovating, like what's next? What don't I know? Being curious about this.
And that excitement, that curiosity, and I think we can all hold it wherever we are in the work that all of us here are doing, of how do we create something that's better, that's greater than we've had. And with that, part of what's been on my mind, and Armando and us with Educare and many of us, is how do we rebuild community? You just can't walk back on a campus as if it's just another day. There needs to be something that's built in. And I know, Gil, that's in a lot of your thought and a lot of your reading. How do we build that sense of family back as a whole unit, as a whole structure of a school or an after-school program? What are your thoughts? Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Stu. I think that the two things that I mean, there's so many elements to this, so much to talk about, but we don't have time, and we want to be sure that we hear from all of you, wonderful audience. But because you all have your own experiences and your own contribution, but I think there are two things that build very nicely on what people have said, and especially Jose, just before me. One is that this situation has been such a global crisis and has been so hard for everyone that it has also created community. I mean, a community of suffering, a community of survival, a community of resiliency. And I don't mean just our small community, but even our national community, our global community. And it's almost, pulled us apart. But fortunately, I think we are coming together and we're coming out of the pandemic. So this idea right this moment that parents, administrators, teachers, students all had similar experiences at the baseline. And then, of course, in communities of color, so much more suffering was happening. But we can actually build on that sense of humanity. That is really what we need to do right now. We all have suffered, and that should be a bond. And then one last thing, I said two things. The second thing is young people were able to do their lives at home the way they wanted to. They could turn on the video, they could turn it off, they could be in bed, they could be up, they could do this or that, depending on the parents, what the parents could tolerate, or the caretakers. They are not going to just come back and say, oh, I'm in school and now I can be bossed around and everyone can tell me what to do. No, that's not the idea. It's not going to work. And it never worked really for adolescents, for sure not. And so here is our opportunity to actually make young people participate in norm setting. They shouldn't just be told what to do. They should be part of what it means to be a community, what the transgressions of the community are, and they should then become part of the community deciding what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. That's, I think, what has to happen. And with that, a second thing, which I talk a lot about in the book, is rituals. We need young people to participate and figure out what are our school and after school rituals. What gives us pleasure, what gives us a sense of who we are, what our identity is, how we celebrate things. All that reduces anxiety and increases commitment to one's community.
Wonderful. You know, those whole idea of rituals, to me, I think we're coming into a time of how do we have the school be a welcome ground to come back into? How do we create a sense of joy, recreation, fun, play, and outdoors? And we're coming into a, I think, opportunity for summer where we can make good use of the beauty and the healing nature of outdoors. So any other thoughts from our panel? And then please, everyone, join in, raise your hands in a moment, put your questions in the chat. We want to open up for your questions. How do we come back into a celebration of coming back versus the chore of how much we can learn straight out, you know, on our first weeks back? How do we build that back into the structures of our programs? Any thoughts on that from anybody on the panel?
I think that, and I hope that teachers don't see it as a continuation, right? Like we've been virtual and now we're in person, but I don't need to take the time to do all the SEL stuff that I would normally do because we've already been together. Let's just hit it and keep going. I think that they have to be so mindful that there's a huge adjustment that's going to take place. And so with my staff, the conversation has been, okay, if you don't really do anything academic the first week, I'd rather it just feel comfortable and feel like a safe place for them. I want them to get acclimated because everything looks different when they come back, right? I have a plastic shield around my desk. I can't get close to my friends. And so I think that the biggest thing is just to make sure that they're comfortable, help them get acclimated, listen to them, figure out what the cues are, really take the opportunity to get to know your students, because although you know them virtually, you don't really know them, right? Like there's a huge extension or disconnect between what goes on virtually and what is actually going to happen in person. Little things for students, right? Do we have to wear uniforms? I think that that's going to be a contentious issue for some students because of the situation they were in. Maybe their parents didn't have money to buy uniforms, but then here's this student whose parents went out and bought brand new uniforms. So in addition to coming back and everything looks different, now I have that type of social anxiety that I'm dealing with. And so I think the biggest thing is, yes, you know, academics are academics, but like everyone else on the panel has been saying, we have to make those connections and we have to make school a safe place. School is supposed to be a safe place. So making it safe and supportive emotionally is the #1 priority.
I feel that the something that systemically that we did this year, and I think it was you were part of it, Armando and Stu, was our soft start. We started, it was easy to do virtually. We just simply met for an hour and a half a day for the first week to ease into this. I think we need to do something very similar, like you were saying, Atrila, to when we come back, maybe minimum days for the first week, and you just ease in. The idea of right now, I've been doing staff circles every 3 weeks after work, like at 6 o'clock, I'll do a circle, a virtual circle, and it's pretty well attended. The staff shows up, they need space to discuss these things, what they're feeling as well. They also feel unheard. They also feel scared. They're also losing loved ones. They're also suffering from mental health issues. The ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, I did a PD on it, and it was the people who thought we didn't need to talk about trauma were also the ones that had the privilege of not having any ACEs. In the chat, I was receiving feedback. Jose, thank you so much for talking about that. This is so taboo to talk about mental health. And we need to make that normal again, talking about our needs, like being the efficacy. I need this, teacher. And the teacher's saying, hey, Jose, I need this. But I think we need just systemically, what does that look like? A soft start. We ease into it, minimum days, whatever that looks like to you, maybe one day virtual, the next day in a real setting, but easing into it, and a lot of circles and making kids, because the anxiety of coming back and being around all these people is going to freak everybody out.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to be aware of it and ready for it. A lot of compassion, a lot of lowered voice, a lot of neutral tones.
Wonderful. And Jose, you make me think, and I know it's something that Armando and those of us with Educare are close in with, is building opportunities for a large number of students and teachers together to be in community through events, through, we call them heartbeats, how to share in circles and groups and learn about what we've been experiencing together and listen to one another in very intentional ways. At this point, I want to open it up to anyone in our room here today. Please raise your hand if you have a question, a comment, a thought, reflection. You can put it in the chat, and we prefer it. Just raise your hand. You can put it in a raised hand or just raise it up on the screen. We'd love to hear from you and ask your question if you would. So you can open your mic and just call out your name and take us in.
Still have
Yeah.
a question, Raul.
Mary kept a, oh, excuse me, Raul. We'll start with Mary and then we'll go over to you, Raul. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm really enjoying the discussion and agree so much with so much that has been said. I work with some school districts that have already been back hybrid models. So junior high and high school students are there maybe 2 days a week. Some are only there a half day. There's a day where they check in with their teacher, you know, and we're working with an after school program with some of these districts. And what we found is a lot of lack of engagement of the students still, like not being engaged like they normally were. And we're concerned with the engagement process for our students and the empowerment for them, and possibly losing some of the kids that just now are just kind of hanging out at home. The teachers have also given them the option to show up or not. So, you know, the parents push to get the kids back at school. And then maybe out of a class of 25, 5 or 6 kids show up and the rest are kind of still hanging out at home. So there's this issue of trying to really make sure that we can get those students engaged and want to come back and look at things differently. So I'm wondering if any of you have been working with some that have already been back hybrid or not, and what we can do to really empower those kids to feel like it's going to be okay. Like some of them are still afraid, some of them don't want to be there, but others have just kind of like, I don't need to be there. The only thing that's really going on is the sports. You know, the sports are opened up again, but not all the other activities. So it's a very challenging time for some of these schools that have already kind of started to go back hybrid. And what would you suggest as a panel to really try to work on that, or maybe you've seen that or not, and that engagement and empowerment of the actual students, that they have a choice to be there, but they're not really choosing to be engaged.
Anybody, how do you get into the want to come back versus I have to come back? Any thoughts from any of the panelists?
I mean, I'll jump in just with 3 words: relationships, relationships, relationships. That's what I think is right this moment. What will get the students back? The relationships to their peers, the relationship to caring adults, the sense of connection. I think that has to be the foundation, and the rest, I think, we need to be patient, and we're inviting them back in April when they know that in June it's over. So it's a really hard time to get back. And if we really introduce it as a introductory offer, so to speak, into the future. And I think the main thing the relationships have to then focus on is optimism about the future, really develop a sense of future again.
Yeah.
I
Well
think
said.
the other R that goes with that, Gil, I totally agree with you, relationships. I think the next R would be relevance.
Yes.
Do not try to jump back into some abstract idea. If we're doing math, and let's talk about exponential growth of viruses, or how are people coping with the mental health issues? Let's investigate this. Let's research this. I remember that my own son, when in his science unit, when they talked about viruses and how they're actually spread and they made it relevant, his anxiety went down. I mean, they used his teaching platform to teach him about what he was going through. And I think relevance is, and people keep like, well, I need to be entertaining. No, you don't. You need to be relevant. I need to be exciting. It needs to be interesting. No, it needs to be relevant, because relevant is interesting. And I just think we need to really focus on that. And too often, like, but I teach biology, I have to get from standard X to standard X. Like, no, you don't. And if you have a principal that's telling you to do that, put them to task. Why exactly? Why do I need to get to cover these standards? I'm going to slow down and teach. But really, relationships, totally agree, Go. And second, the relevance. It has to be relevant. These people have lost loved ones. I have an 11th grader, like I said, lost 6 family members to COVID. You're going to come back and tell him he needs to learn this stuff just in case someday he's going to use it? No. What can you do in your classroom that's going to help him make sense of the world he's in?
Thank you, Jose. Other questions? I saw Raul Fernandez. Raul, go right ahead, open your mic.
So it was the same question that Mary asked, so my question's been answered and discussed right now, so I'll pass.
Thank you, Raul. Others, if you would, just open your mic, introduce yourself, or place it in the chat. Who else has a question, comment? And as I'm seeing in the chat room right now, comments coming from Andrea. Yes, relationships bring those connections, a sense of belonging. And I noticed earlier from Anita, the whole idea of trust. And how do we build that back in? And I think after school programming, our expanded learning work, that's the place where the kids really can build those relationships back up, because it's already been established. We're finding out the kids are wanting to come back because they want to be back in close to their, not only their friends, but a lot of our staff as well. Who else has a comment or question?
I feel like we need to be a little realistic about engagement too, because when I was evaluating teachers as a principal, I just got to evaluating some teachers virtually, very different experience. But I would script what I was seeing, and I would have evidence that maybe 3 kids were actually engaged with the teacher. The other 40 were sitting back passively. So I don't think we had a lot of engagement prior to this. Those teachers who had the most engagement were the ones that had the best relationships. They also used, they used actual protocols like non-volunteers. The popsicle stick thing sounds silly. We were in a high school and we used it because it worked. And the same thing worked virtually. I'm an airplane stack. So first I'm going to call on Gloria, then it's going to be Gil, then it's going to be Armando. So I know it's coming. I can prepare my answer. And I also know but there's things we can do, but I think we just need to be a little realistic. We weren't having great engagement before this. Based on evidence, what do we have? Maybe 4 or 5 kids were actually raising their hand. And I would present it to the teacher. Well, based on this, I have evidence that 3 kids understood what was going on in your classroom. Well, what do you mean? This one kid answered all the questions. Everybody else sat back and let him. So let's rethink how we do engagement. Let's rethink that. I don't want us to walk in going like, oh, it was so much better. It was so much better before. No, it wasn't. It just wasn't. We're going to rethink that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jose. Atrilla, I know you wanted to add in there.
I did. And so when we think about engagement, I think we talked a lot about student voice. And so really look into them, what feels comfortable for them, whether it is having those circles, let's just sit and let's talk it out, or whether it's needing to physically move, right? Like there's so many restrictions being placed on them. What does going outside look like? And so my staff and I are working right now on like, what does physical enrichment look like when we go back and we have to be socially distanced? We're putting together sort of a workbook of sorts that we'll use across our district, things that they can do inside the classrooms, things that they can do outside. A part of our engagement is going to be not only serving students that are on campus, but just sort of realizing that some parents don't feel comfortable, right? And they're going to keep their kids virtual. And so during those asynchronous times, how do we support those students that are at home? How do we still make sure that they're getting that opportunity to socialize with their peers? How do we make sure that they're participating in enrichment activities? So being very deliberate in our lesson planning and making sure that there is that focus on enrichment, because we know that the teachers have the academics covered, but what can we do when it comes to enrichment? So do we continue with cooking classes? Are we doing acting classes? Are we pulling in dance? What can we do to make school fun, right? There are parts of school that are fun, that aren't stressful, that aren't strenuous. That's what I'm focusing on. How do we make school fun? How do we make it welcoming and engaging for them?
Wonderful. Even to talk about fun and education, Gillian mentioned earlier about radical. Maybe fun and play is part of the radicalization of education, that we can bring back the fun and the joy and the play inside. And I'm noticing a lot of wonderful questions and thoughts in the chat, so please keep them coming. Tomas, I'm going to invite you, because I know the great work you're doing in LA. If you would unmute yourself and ask that question that you have in the chat.
Yes, so thank you, Stu. Thank you, everyone. This is a great conversation to have. You know, I think it's very important to think about the students who have had to take on extra tasks, right? Who have had to potentially go to work, who are, you know, watching their siblings as their parents have to go to work, right? We were talking about earlier about how everyone's experience is different, right? And so these students, sometimes we have some that aren't even going to class anymore, right? They're still turning in their homework. They're still, because during the morning time, they're going to work. They're making money to support their families, some whose parents have lost their jobs. And so it's really important for us to think about that. How do we support those students? How do we support those families? And how do we tell those students, hey, you have to stop working now, you have to come back to campus, right?
That's real. Who would like to address that? Anything, Gloria, in the way you're working with your students? Jose, I know you have those high school students who are out there in the neighborhood. What would you say?
You know, when we have those kids at my daughter, she goes to my school, and she was a little shocked. And like, I grew up single mother, East LA, poor and all that stuff. She is not. And when they're in a breakout room and one of her classmates turns her camera on and sees the little brother sitting on his lap, and then sees his room with 3 other kids sharing the space, all with headphones on, trying to focus, it really gave her some perspective. And then as seniors, we're trying to get them to graduate, and they're trying to put food on the table right now. It's really tough if you're undocumented. Your parents are really having a hard time, so you are going out and working. It's absolutely, Tomas, that's absolutely real point. And we need to rethink some of that. And again, our grading policies. So if the kid gets the work done and turns it in at midnight virtually because he had to work all day, is that okay? Were they able to just demonstrate that they knew the topic? Or does it have to be in at 3:30 every day because that's what your syllabus says? Can we be flexible? Can we focus on the learning, not just the teaching? It's taking a lot of conversations. And I think a lot of us have been working on our evergreen lessons for the last 3 decades. We want to make sure we can plug these in and use these and be on autopilot. And we just can't anymore. We need to adjust to individual kids' needs because they're real. So I think it's a great thing. And we just need to do a lot more rethinking. Put our values in front of us instead of our policies and procedures. We say we love our kids. What exactly does that look like? And how does your syllabus and grading system reflect love and not just ease? There's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Jose, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I do think there's, having been a single mom myself, I do think it's important to recognize that sometimes as the children get older, that they want to help, so that it doesn't fall all on the back of a mother who's trying to do their best. But one of the things I think that we're noticing in our community is that when those students are doing that extra work, is that we let them know that they can actually put that on a resume and helping them make their first resume. We also have a lot of our business partnerships who are saying, you know, I want that student's name because I want to have them on a paid internship that they can actually earn college credit for. And that's especially true amongst our high school students. So again, thinking outside the box though, and not thinking that this is the way it's been done, this is the way it has to be done. Forget that. We need to be, again, reimagining what education can be. And so these young people can feel like they're successful. And so one of the things I know we're starting to focus on is what are their dreams? We want them to start dreaming again. And so one of the things we're trying to do is getting to open up about what do you dream about? What is it that you hope to accomplish one day, and start them dreaming again. I think that's going to be an important thing to do, getting their voice in the room.
Excellent. Thanks, Gloria. Thanks, Jose. And I'm seeing comments coming through the chat. One of the ones that kind of came up for me, in fact, there it is from Marcos. Marcos, if you're able to, would you unmute yourself? I think you have a question that could really open up some good discussion.
Hi, my name is Marcos and I'm over here in Oakland, but I work in the Richmond, the West Contra Costa Unified School District. One of the questions that I have is, Jose brought up a good point in regards to having the self-opening. And sounds like a great idea. Is something that we can focus more on the mental well-being of the students and staff, because it may be overwhelming. But how can we convince, or how do we have those in the district to focus on those kind of that method instead of, well, because of ground requirements, we need to have such and such amount of students participate on a daily basis? Because this comes from a perspective, at the beginning of the school year, the assumption became, oh, we're just gonna move everything transitioning to digital and we're gonna have to meet the same requirements as in person. It became so unrealistic that even I myself was a little bit shocked about that perspective. So my question is, if we wanna focus on the well-being of the students and the community, how can we get the district, those in leadership, to buy into the idea of like, we need to focus on the connections of those who are feeling comfortable coming in?
Can I just, that's a great question. If I can respond, or do you want someone else?
Please, Gil, please.
Okay.
Oh, anybody, I love it.
Yeah. No, you will. I think this is such a good question. I think you'll hear from a lot of us. I think that, let me start with what I think we shouldn't do. What I hear a lot in my work with districts and with schools and even out of school time programs, which is, we got to do socio-emotional learning for the next month, and then we can start teaching and learning other things. That, I think, is a mistake. I mean, if you want to win over school district leadership, I don't think it's necessary to first do socio-emotional learning and relationship building, and then you learn. I think we have to get to the point that learning is relationship building. And that's why I like this idea. We have that too in our thinking. I mean, relevance, that it becomes meaningful, relational, and resilient now. And I think once it's formed that way, then you don't have the dichotomy between, oh, we need to actually fill the gap. It's about gaps again. But it is really about the whole person, the whole young person, who can only learn when he or she can focus. And after traumatic year, it's very hard for all of us to focus. So we need both working together. That's, I think, what people, at least my experience with district leadership, they know what we're talking about. They just feel under tremendous pressure to bring back the academic accountable kind of action. And I think if we can say, no, it's a much better way to get there if we do the whole child again.
Yeah, well said, Gil. Gloria, I was curious, I know you work a lot in terms of the politics of decision making. How do you influence your administrators, your decision makers, to help see this way?
Again, it's about looking at the shared values that we have and moving in the same direction. If you have data, I've always said to our expanded learning programs, show the difference that you're making between the students who attend your programs and those who do not. I said, if you're increasing their reading skills, you need to demonstrate that. If you're increasing their social emotional learning skills, you need to demonstrate that. Data plays a big part in that. The other thing is getting a seat at the table. You have to be able to be at the table. And that's one thing that I have tried to do over the years, and to get my program directors to step up into those leadership positions. So it's just not me trying to do it all in our region, but to get them to participate in leadership roles. And we're at the table. We are at the table, and they see that expanded learning needs to be part of the going forward in the reopening of our schools, but also in terms of helping our students become successful. So that's the biggest thing, is to earn their trust and to have the data, but also to have the ability to demonstrate that parents trust you, students trust you, and to be in those rooms where decisions are being made. And it's really relevant right now more than ever.
Great. Thank
I'll
you, Gloria.
piggyback on that.
Please.
I think it's so important what she says, to have a seat at the table. And sometimes that's not easy, right? Like sometimes we're, oh, that's just after school. So you have to really advocate for that. And I think that within our organization, one of the things that's been so powerful is that we do have a seat at the table. Like we're included in all decisions, even the decision to reopen, which was initially, oh, we'll just send after school back and we'll do a Parks and Rec model, right? Well, maybe, and we're happy to do that, but what suits the needs of students best? And so ultimately that conversation led to, you know what, no, let's bring everyone back. Let's all work together. But if we hadn't had a seat at the table, it would just be, here's after school, they're gonna run the Parks and Rec model and we'll continue as usual with everyone else working from home virtually. And so I think that it's valuable in having an organization or having a group of leaders that takes all of the stakeholders into account, not just their certificated staff, but looks at what everyone has to say, because we all come with different areas of expertise.
Thank you. And I'm seeing comments in here, Ronnie. Thank you. Goes out so far to Gloria, Trilla, Jose Gil for insights, Mazel, and lots of love in the mix here. Others, questions, thoughts? Love to have, just raise your hand or just open your mic and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I just want to just say something real quick. We're waiting for somebody to ask a question. Is that as school leaders, we don't know what to do. We're doing the best we can with what we got where we're at. We're doing the best we can. So if you have an idea, you need to present some data, qualitative and quantitative data, and give us some ideas. But I think the reason I worked with Stu and Armando for our soft start is I didn't say, I got an idea, and they said, well, build it. They came to me with ideas, and then we built this thing together. And it was thing about Paulo Freire and like pedagogy of the oppressed. Stu never told me what to do. He was asking me questions. And that was the idea, we ask. I think it's very important to you guys as after school providers, those that are in the group, is provide an option for your school leaders. Here's an idea. If we come back with a soft start, here's an idea. If we're going to come back hybrid, here's an idea. If we come back virtual, but to come back like, we need this. Okay, what does it look like? I don't know. Well, thank you. I've got a million problems. I need some solutions. Don't come to me with a problem. I need a solution. And so we really are just doing the best we can. And our staff, I sound like I'm definitely hard on my staff, and I am, because they have college degrees, they have benefits, and they're not in the same situation my kids are. But with that said, they too are suffering, just like the school leaders. When I have a moment alone with the admin, people are shaking. People are crying because they don't want to let these kids down either. And so sit at the table, earn your spot at the table, come with some solutions, not just, oh, that principal will pull his head out his ass. Yeah, that's probably true. Can you help him? Or are you just going to blame him? Just a little bit of empathy all around, a little bit of compassion all around.
Yeah. And I think that empathy for ourselves as well, part of the self-care I think we're looking for is how do we take care of ourselves? And I know that's been on a lot of people's agenda over these months here. We're soon going to come into the closing part, but and I'm seeing there's a question here from Lee. Lee, why don't you open your mic and ask that question?
Sure, thank you. We have been operating our after-school program on approximately half the number of employees that we left with last March. We've been able to serve students in a virtual manner at this point of time in half-hour support sessions of approximately 4 students to a session, 4 to 7 students. And we're serving about 250 students on a daily basis right now. The district did make the decision to return to full-time face-to-face programming the day after spring break, which for us is August the 21st. And there has been a call to return to after-school programming as it was. Now, the needs of those students that have been meeting with us for those half-hour support sessions is different than what parents are looking for in that full-day program. I understand that completely. I would love to be able to do that. If I had the staff to do that, I would do that. But we had 700 students in our program. And how am I going to decide which ones of those parents that maybe didn't take advantage of the virtual because the 30 minutes was not what their need was? Their need was to have us there the 3 hours for daycare as well. Yeah. So I don't know how I would put a priority on selecting students.
Yeah, it's a real question coming up. And I know, Atrilla, you're right on that, probably Gloria, because you're in the field like we are with Educare. How do you address that staffing right now?
Yikes. So we experienced the same thing, right? Luckily, we retained more than 50%, but because most of our staff, they're college students, and because they had to shift to virtual studies, their schedules are all over the place. And so we have made the decision not to come back with the traditional expanded learning program. I've allowed them to craft their own schedules. So tell me what 5-hour shift you can work that makes sense with their schedules, and you needing to secure childcare for your kids and all that. And instead, we are going to push into the school day to provide our services. So we'll do small group instruction, we'll do one-on-one, we'll provide supports to students that are still virtual. And so essentially we're taking our services and just providing them during the school day so that we don't encounter that. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Lee. That is going to be so hectic for you. I think that that's a challenge that we're all going to face. And so we have just decided that, you know, when we come back, we only have about 8 or 9 weeks. We won't even tackle it right now. We'll deal with it in the fall, and hopefully by then we're fully staffed and we're ready to go. We shifted our enrollment process to an online process so that there isn't that face-to-face interaction, because I know that our parents can be brutal, and I don't want my frontline staff to have to deal with that, because they're going to have that apprehension and anxiety coming back too. So as much as I can create a buffer for them, but I would say to you, do what makes sense. Think about what you can provide and how you can provide it. You want it to be what best suits the needs of the school and of the students, and not necessarily what people are expecting you to do. And some people are going to love it and some people are going to hate it. But as long as you have thought through it and you have formulated a plan that works best for your staff and your program, be okay with that.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
I have a comment, Stu.
Please, Terrence, go for it.
Just a statement. I've been speaking to a lot of my administrators, and like you, Mr. Navarro, everyone's concern is just uncertainty. Most of the administrators are concerned that the need for after school care, it's not going to be enough to actually service that of the community, that of what is being promised by the district. Just not knowing how everyone is going to roll out, what our actual roles are going to be. It's just a big question of, how are we going to go about it? I mean, we're ready to tackle it and take on the task. Our staff is uncertain. And like you said, mental health is a big issue, but people, they miss what they do. They love what they do. So they're still willing to do it. It's just not knowing how we're going to, and if we will be able to service the need of everybody. I think that's what's going to be overwhelming.
I think that whole question, all of us, of how to deal with uncertainty, and then I want to just kind of piggyback on what I heard Gloria say. With that uncertainty, to let our voices be heard, get ourselves at the table in conversations, whether it be just with our supervisors, whether it be in city conversations, whether it be with after-school leaders, put our voices known, because I think there's a willingness right now, and there's going to be funding in a whole new dimensions to really understand. And I see what Kate, you said in here, how do we address the needs of those kids who are dealing with housing instability, with foster youth? So the comprehensive ability for after school to really step in now is very strong. We're poised for this. We've been prepared for this. So I think we have to let our voices be known that we're at the table. We can really provide. So I would just encourage you to just get out there, all of us, in all those ways.
Can I just add to that? I think that you just kind of said it in passing, Stu, but I think it's really essential, which is funding. Because, you know, we have a situation in California, it's better than in many other states in the country, around stability of funding for the out-of-school sector and for education in general. And I think there is now, through the stimulus funding, a third round of funding, and this time, this third round in the trillions really has after school written all over it. And there is a great amount of money that's coming to the out of school time field. But I don't think people know exactly how to access this money. No one really, again, if you talk about uncertainty, no one knows exactly how this will work, how much will go through the states, how much will go through to districts, probably through the states, how much then goes from the districts to the out of school time. It is also in need now to go directly to the nonprofit sector. So I think there has to be, for California and for the rest of the nation, a lot of time spent on figuring out how the funding works, because that is where we can kind of open kind of new approaches. And to Kate's question, you know, that funding is not just going to be single funding to schools or to out of school time. It needs to be braided. This is a chance to really look at, because the after school field can't fund the housing instability. It's very, you know, that's pretty impossible. So we need like the housing funding to get together with the schooling and the mental health and the education. And that's a Herculean task, because everything is fragmented, you know, from the government down to the programs. So I think there's, you know, needs concretely to work with the After School Alliance, with the community school initiatives. There are kind of national organizations that I think we need to kind of support in order to speak for all of us.
Jose, thank you, Gil.
I just real quickly, I think the uncertainty, like Lee's question, embrace the uncertainty. We often didn't like the answers that were coming from above in the past. And so let's just embrace that. And if you're not getting a seat at the table, I do think that's important, but then call a meeting, you know, set your own table. Call a meeting, invite the principal and his liaison, where for community partners, to your meeting. And just, I don't know what to do. We got to address this issue. What ideas you have? There's the collective genius is, and we have all these platforms where we can actually discuss this. It's there. But if we're scared of the uncertainty, we're waiting until we have the perfect answer before we move, we'll never move. And so just simply look at some data, know that people need us, and you can't do everything, but you can do something. And start seeing curiosity and wondering as a value, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well said. Thank you, Jose. I want to, this has been so rich in conversation. As we're starting to close out, I'd like each of us just to kind of look back over this 90 minutes, consider what's your key takeaway from today? What can you use from what you've been hearing, what you've been learning? And if you would, place it in the chat. Let's kind of collectively take of what we're seeing that we can use of today. So if you would, take a moment. What's your key takeaway from today? And let's just kind of, and lots of thanks are coming through. We appreciate that. What can you take and make use of? If it's a comment, if it's a phrase. Tracy, thank you for the conversations. Lots of gratitude for the conversation. Any key learnings, any key takeaways? Create your own seat at the table. April, what the students need, what the staff needs. Anita, build a bigger table. Love it. Other things you've taken from today. Getting students to dream again. Valerie, thank you. What it means to be a community. Reminders to teach from the heart. Kim, thank you. Establish connections. Great. Help come up with solutions. We know the importance. Emphasis on connections. Collect the data. Be solution oriented. Maslow over Bloom. Student voice. Equity doesn't always equal equality. Just think of the richness of what we've come to today. And what I'm going to ask that we do, and we're going to have some announcements at the end. I know the power of creative thought. I know the power of dreaming. I've done that for years with students in my classrooms of dreaming, and they step into their dreams. So I'm going to invite us all, here we are, 100+ people, is to now place your thoughts of your dreams for the kids, of the positive optimism that Gil spoke of. What do you see in reentry? And place those images in your thoughts right now. If it's joy, if it's happiness, if it's comfort, if it's voice, and get an image of what it's like for us as a community coming back in, adults, parents, students, after-school program leaders, staff, and what that richness would be as we come back together, the happiness that we can be as kids learn and grow and thrive, and allow those images to propel us into this future that we're going to get to create. And in closing, I want to just again thank Sam Pia, Stacy Dario from Temescal How Kids Learn. A deep thanks to our panelists, Trilla, Gloria, Gil, Jose, to each of you making the time for today. We want to share with you some resources. And Armando, thank you for the tech side. And he has a resource. One is Gil's book, 10 Big Bets, Transforming Education During the Pandemic and Beyond. And there you have the code for that. Educare republished a book that I wrote 30 years ago, and it's called Making the Best of Me. So let's stick there on that image there so you can take that photo. And there it is inside of the chat as well. And then the Educare book, Making the Best of Me, about 300 activities for middle and high school students of building those connections back. So in closing, we just want to thank you for making time today to be with us. The strength that you have, the courage you have to do the work that you do, all of us, the kids, is for them, and we know that. And in closing, just if you would open your screen, take a look. You may not get to say hi to everyone, but just wish your best. And we're going to open the mic for a moment. So in your own voice, if you want to say goodbye, any of your closing thanks, just open mic and please speak your voice out as we say goodbye to you. So thank you very, very much for being with us today. And our panelists, a huge thanks.